Hello, my brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Off the Beaten Path, the show that looks at paranormal events both historically as well as in modern-day times. As always, I'm your host, Rev.hagen, and as always, I'd like to welcome our listeners at SCRMradio.com. That's Scream. Radio.com for all your horror and paranormal needs. This is really an exciting show for me because this is our year anniversary. This show has literally been on for 1 year as of yesterday. So thank you all so much for the subscriptions, for the sharing, for liking the videos, for commenting on the videos. Our listeners at SCRMradio, our screamers, thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this crazy experiment that I call Off the Beaten Path. I really hope you enjoy it. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up in the new year. I know you don't think the sets could get any more exciting than they already are, but it's going to happen. So thank you so much. And please share this, like, subscribe, hit the little bell there to get updates on our channel. Spread the word as always, like I always ask you guys to do. Again, thank you so much for being here. Now, today's episode is actually on, drumroll please. Well, I don't really have a drum roll, but what it's on this week is on the Skinwalker Ranch, aka the Sherman, initially the Sherman Ranch. Sorry about the squeaky. I found this featherless, this plucked chicken from one of the cartoons back in the forever days when I was walking in the desert. The things you can find walking in the desert. But apparently it's a chew toy. So, sorry for the squeaks there. If you've got headphones on, I know that had to be painful for you. Back to the show. The Skinwalker Ranch. Now, the Skinwalker Ranch is approximately 480 acres, southeast of Ballard, Utah. And the amount of stuff that happens on this, I got to take a quick drink real quick. The amount of paranormal activity that happens here, literally of almost every kind of paranormal activity we've ever heard about, happens on this ranch. UFOs, they got them. Sasquatch, Bigfoot, other cryptoids, yeah, they're there. Ghostly apparitions that materialize then disappear, yeah. Orbs, oh, they're there. Giant wolf activity, believe it, it happens. All on this one concentrated little ranch. Now, since this, we do try to do a little learning here on the show. We're going to get into the history of this place. It's a little dry, not too dry, but it's a little dry. Then we'll get into the modern day when a family actually bought this ranch. Okay, so historically there's been a strange phenomena in this area for a very long time. The Spanish explorers, led by Father Escalante in the 1700s, describe what can only be described as UFOs to us, strange metallic shapes and lights above their encampment. And this was, again, in the 1700s. Native Americans in the area have described what can only be called UFOs forever in this area. Lights dancing around, strange craft dancing around. In the entire basin, in this whole area where this phenomenon happens, 80% of the people that live there have had some kind of experience. 80%, either with UFOs, again, cryptoids, spheres of light dancing around in their pastures, strange animals, aka the cryptoids, cattle mutilations, which I forgot to mention, very popular in this particular valley in Utah, in this basin. Dr. Frank Salisbury actually wrote a book about it called The Utah UFO Display. And he and George Knapp, George Knapp is he's a reporter out of Vegas now, out of Nevada. But he wrote some of the first articles about this. And honestly, most of the information you're going to hear today are either from his book or from lectures that he's given. He's kind of the definitive guy, other than an organization that we'll talk about later, NIDS, NIDS, National Institute for Discovery Sciences, Thank you very much. I didn't even look at the notes on that one. Thank you so much. These two guys him and this organization have been looking into this for years now. In fact, George Knapp still goes to Skinwalker Ranch at least twice a year to check it out. Before we really get into it, I would give my left eye to get access to this ranch and to try to do some investigation myself. I know this show is based on somebody else's investigation. I don't know what to tell you. I don't have the time or the money or the resources to do the kind of investigations that I'd love to. If you'd like to see me do it, please visit our Patreon page. You can give $1, you can give $2, $5, $20, whatever you want. You can even give a monthly donation if you'd like to do that. If you'd like to become a patron of our page, it would be greatly appreciated, and we could start doing some of these things. And once more, I have digressed. Back to the story. So Salisbury writes this book, the Utah UFO Display. And he and Knapp at the time were kind of convinced that these were displays for our benefit, that whatever was going on here, we're doing these displays for the benefit of the observers. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit, but I found that a very interesting conclusion once you've heard everything that's gone on this ranch. Now, Dr. Salisbury, his main source of information was a guy named Junior Hicks, who had compiled thousands and thousands of stories and data from the people in his town. Now, who's Junior Hicks, you ask? Junior Hicks was the local high school science teacher, for goodness sakes. That the locals, when something would happen, they would go to him. So many people had this guy as their science guy growing up that he was kind of their go-to. Well, our teacher, Junior Hicks, he knows a lot about science. He's probably the guy to come up with this. So what Salisbury did is take the best 400 of all these most incredible and most believable, or credible, I should say, and believable UFO cases to base his book on. Junior Hicks is also he compiled so much information, and hats off to this guy. He didn't blow all these people up, all these crazy nuts that I live with. He not only did he believe them, but and compile all this data, but actually found the epicenter of most of these occurrences were, you guessed it, the Skinwalker Ranch or the Sherman Ranch. An amazing guy to do all this. To me, that just absolutely blows me away. And he's the one that came up with the term Skinwalker Ranch after the Native Americans' legend of the Skinwalker that we'll get into in a moment. And we'll get into it right now. What is a skinwalker? Well, as far as the Native Americans are concerned, skinwalker is a shapeshifter, also believed to be a sorcerer, kind of a practitioner of the dark arts, was not opposed to using his magic and his ways, if you will, for not just personal gain, but to harm other people. Kind of a badass in the spiritual community. If you look up Skinwalker, it gives you a ton of information. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a second as well. They're said to be able to get into people's minds and make them do what they want them to do, see what they want them to see. One of the reasons that Junior Hicks probably decided to name all this, name the epicenter of this stuff a Skinwalker Ranch, because of the weird phenomenon we're about to get into. The way they shapeshift, specifically skinwalkers anyway, at least according to my data, is they would put on the skins of an animal and literally transform into that animal. Now, we've discussed shapeshifting a bit in the past, and I've seen people that say they can turn into animals. I've been witness to some rituals for this, and they will put on the skin of the animal, and then they act like the animal. You know what I mean? They start taking on the behavior of the animal. But it's very rare to see somebody actually transform into that animal, and that is what the skinwalkers allegedly do. Now, in Western culture, we kind of look at that as a bunch of hooey, if we're being honest, right? Oh, there's probably just a legend of these people. They're primitive people is what a lot of Westerners would call them, which I find repugnant, that term, to be honest with you. But that's the reality that we live in. A lot of people will call these, well, these are just primitive people with primitive suspicions. Or it's a religious thing. It's one of those primitive religious beliefs that we're not going to get into. But if you try to talk to a Native American, interestingly enough, about skinwalkers, they won't do it. Whether it's the Utes that are predominantly in the area, the Navajos, the Sioux, you're hard pressed to find an actual Native American to talk about these, because they believe that if you talk about a skinwalker is going to find you, which is kind of a scary thing to believe in, but that's what they believe. So if during this whole thing, if you see something come up behind me, could you leave it in the notes? I know it'll probably be too late by then, but have my back. I'd really appreciate it. Okay. Historically, also, when we're talking about the Ute tribe in particular, that's native to this area, the Native Americans that are native to this area, excuse me, they back in the day, back 200-300 years ago, these guys were badass warrior tribe, okay? Pardon my French there. These guys were a warrior tribe that did not make life very fun for the other tribes in the area, especially the Navajo. When the Spanish came through, they actually sided or made a contract of sorts with the Spanish. And what they would do is they would capture Navajo, the Navajo people, when they would invade their camps, and trade them to the Spanish for horses and rifles, but mainly horses and some Western medicine, and various other things, but mainly for horses. Yeah, so these guys were not too hip with the Navajos, and rightly so. In fact, they expelled the Navajos from what they considered their Garden of Eden of sorts. That was in San Luis Valley in Colorado. The Utes came down and kind of massacred and got rid of the Navajos that were in that area. And because of that, they believe that the Navajo, because of all their transgressions, slaughtering them in the San Luis Valley, selling them as slaves to the Spanish. God, how horrible. They believed that the Navajo sent them a skinwalker. And that's when the trouble began. But again, you're hard-pressed to even get that information out of the Ute tribe because of the fear of talking about skinwalkers. I thought it was... thought that was absolutely fascinating. Just to give you a real quick blurb, and then we'll get into the people that bought the ranch. George Knapp, who articles first appeared in Salt Lake City, the Utah Desert News, and alternately weekly in the Las Vegas Mercury, wrote some of the first articles about this. That's another reason why my go-to is George Knapp for all this stuff. He's a very thorough investigative journalist, and will back up his articles with his sources, where he got the information, and where you can look at the information for yourself. To me, that's not, I hate this term, but fake news. It's nothing like this. This guy backs up what he's talking about. So, the Gorman family, which is the ranchers we've been talking about, the Gormans, the Gorman ranchers, didn't know anything about any of this stuff. They bought the ranch back in 1994, and when they did, they found they settled in the main homestead. There's 3 homesteads that are on this ranch. Okay, they settled in the main homestead there. Okay. When they got there, after they had bought this ranch, they found these giant metal stakes that had been pounded into the ground with a length of chain on them. The same kind of thing you'd find with like a lot of people that own big dogs or pit bulls will chain their dogs up that way in the backyard. I personally think that's a very cruel thing to do to a dog. You give it 25 feet. A lot of them have choke collars on them. Do a lot of damage to the dogs, even if they don't, even if they have a regular collar on them. And you keep your animal chained up in the backyard, bad things happen to the dog. Physically, psychologically, the whole 9 yards. I'm getting off base here right now, but dogs, I got to put a little plea out to my dog owners that watch this show. Dogs are social animals. They're pack animals. So to leave them alone in a backyard, chained up, does so much damage to them, not just physically, but psychologically and emotionally. Yeah, you might be saying, Hagen, Rev, they're dogs. Yeah, they're dogs that you've taken the responsibility for. So step up, little cowboys. Anyway, so they found these stakes in the ground, in the front and the back of the house, around the doors, almost as if they were guarding the house. They also found huge slide locks in all the doors leaving the home, which is, as far as I'm concerned, pretty fascinating. Almost immediately, strange things started happening in the house. Some of these I'm going to read because they're kind of detailed. There's a lot of them here. I don't know if I can pack them all into our show, but I'm going to do my best. Some of the small things that started happening at first was like cast iron skillets would disappear, and then they'd reappear out of nowhere in the refrigerator or in the microwave. Another incident, when the farmer was digging a post, right? He's digging post holes, and those things are kind of heavy, pretty big, right? So he's digging a post hole. He takes a break, leans it up against his hip, takes a drink of water, looks down, and it's gone. 3 weeks later, this post hole digger appeared 75 feet up in the air in a tree. There is no explanation for something like that. That's just weird, right? Mom did some shopping one day. She came home with the groceries, right? Puts all the groceries away, goes up to use the restroom, goes upstairs to use the restroom, washes her hand, comes back downstairs. All the groceries are back in the bag like they had never been put away at all. At one point, the rancher and his wife were heading into town. At this point, they had already lost like 14 head of cattle, okay? Either disappeared or they had been mutilated and put there with no blood left in the bodies, with sometimes almost with surgical, not almost, but with laser-like surgical precision, because all the wounds were cauterized. Organs were removed, the lips, the eyes, from some of their cattle. So they were kind of freaking out. This is before their trip to town, right? They had 4 bulls, and this is important because these bulls were a high-end breed called Seminole bulls. They weighed a minimum of 2,000 pounds. They had 4 of these guys. And the rancher was thinking, and said to his wife before they left, if we lose these bulls, it's over. We can't afford this. We can't afford to keep this place going anymore. These bulls, are our salvation. We can breed them with, the whole 9 yards. They're really not just high end, but they're so useful to the farm, right? Well, when they get back, these bulls are in this metal enclosure, right? This kind of metal corral they had. That I think if you're watching on YouTube, a picture is going to come up here in a second of it. The 4 bulls were mashed into this thing. It would be hard. You'd be hard pressed to get one of these bulls. They're pretty ill-tempered into this thing, but let alone all 4 of them. So, but before they find them, they're running around in a panic, realizing we had just talked about this before we left. This is the end. When they find the bulls, the rancher finally yells out, hey, to the bulls, because they kind of seem out of it. They snap out of it and go into a rage and just start tearing this metal enclosure apart. The paddock where they were in was still wired shut, the same way he had always wired it shut. No explanation for how these bulls got from the paddock into there and in that almost drugged and dazed condition. Crazy. They started seeing shapes and figures all around the ranch and the house. They started hearing heavy footsteps, and they started seeing large, dark-like figures looking at them through their bedroom window. And eventually they'd see these guys on the end of their bed when they would wake up, and then they would disappear. Imagine how terrifying just one of these events would be, let alone to have this happen over and over and over again, right? The rancher, at one point, they were out on their porch. The rancher and his wife were out on their porch in the evening drinking java. And they heard voices above them that sounded almost like this. It was a language they didn't know, but it sounded very Slavic to them, right? Very Eastern European bloc, the Eastern Bloc. And he yells up, "Cut it out!" And they start getting mocked by these voices in whatever language it was, but there was a very mocking tone to it. They began to feel that everything they did was being watched. And this is a really weird part to me that pulls into one of my possible explanations for this that we'll get into at the end of the video. They started hearing what they can only describe as machinery beneath the ground. Almost like an underground railroad, like a literal railroad, not like the Underground Railroad that took slaves out from the south, got them to the north. This was a literal railroad that they were hearing underground, heavy machinery. Their neighbors heard the same thing, by the way. They saw a number of large wolves and other large canine kind of creatures. One day, the wife was coming home, stopped at the large front gate they had to get into their property. And after she opened the gate to pull and to get in the car to pull the car through, she saw a wolf that was huge, almost beyond imagination huge. Its back was taller than the car, the back of the wolf. And not only that, but there was another large black dog with this wolf that's head was abnormally small for its body. They started seeing these crazy red birds. And I know this is a little disjointed, but I wanted to give you kind of the as quickly as I can, as much weird information as I can, because this is nothing but weird and strange information. They started seeing these crazy birds, like tropical birds, red plumage, that are not only not native to that area, but they were only seen for a short period and then they disappeared. Nobody had these kind of birds in the area. You'd see these kind of things in the rainforest. At one point, the rancher heard a disturbance outside. He ran out to find his horses in a panic. And what he saw in their paddock, right, not panic, but paddock, in their enclosure, was a 200-pound animal that had kind of the body of a hyena, but had a bushy tail like a wolf. It was like nothing he had ever even heard about, that was trying to claw at these animals. So as he, kind of yelps in fright and in frustration at this thing, it jumps out of the paddock and runs to the ridge that ran above their particular homestead that's been named Skinwalker Ridge. Ran up to that ridge, turned around and looked at him, and vanished. Not like walked away, but poof, gone. Absolutely crazy. When NIDS, sorry, that's a little squeaky toy again. When NIDS was interviewing them about what he called the bulletproof wolf that they'd been seeing on more than one occasion, the NIDS team decided to show them a bunch of pictures of different kind of canines, kind of like a police lineup, right? And the one that the picture that they thought best described what they were seeing was something called the dire wolf that's been extinct for 10,000 years. But it had that kind of mass to it. It was that large. Can you imagine a wolf that big? Literally, where the head or the back would pretty much come up to my shoulder if it's as tall as a car. Crazy. There are a lot of animals that have been seen over and over. After all this, they started seeing what only can be described as UFOs or orbs in the area, and orbs of different kind of colors, from white, red to orange, and we're going to get into those real quick. The blue orbs are spheres, were about the size of a softball, but they're described as being made of glass, almost, of all things, but inside there's a blue almost storm going on of liquid. Now these orbs inspired primal dread. When people would see these things, they'd literally drop to the ground in fear or run in the house in blind terror for their lives. Unbelievable. Most of the, pardon the click there, most of the phenomenon they had been seeing, they got used to, right? I don't know why it is, but people just kind of adapt to their situation, right? So they kind of got used to the animals and the weirdness of the area, things disappearing and reappearing. But what they couldn't get used to were the orbs, especially the blue ones that just, like I said, inspired fear. Saw a lot of flying discs. They even saw a sombrero-shaped object that seems to fly right through the Skinwalker Ridge that I just described, just above the property. They saw something that looked like an F-17 stealth fighter that had the appearance of Christmas lights all around it. It would materialize and shine a spotlight down on the ground as if it were looking for something. Sometimes they'd even hear the underground machinery noises, and the ground would light up either from above or from below. The ground would literally light up. They saw a lot of the orange orbs, and what the rancher Gorman did, the husband did, is when he would look at these things through his sight, right, through his rifle sight. When he'd look at these orange orbs, he would describe on the other side of them, through the orb, mind you, another world. Sometimes it would be nighttime in that world. Sometimes it would be daytime in that world. He would report things flying in and out of these giant orange orbs. There are 3 other homesteads on the property. One of them, Ranch Gorman, discovered, get this, 20 to 30 giant scoop marks in the ground, as if machinery had come and dug out tons, literally hundreds of tons of dirt. They almost look like a cookie cutter impression if you looked at it from above. The dirt that it was excavated, there were no mounds of dirt around this. The dirt was just gone. Now, they never heard anything. For machinery to come in, make all that racket, you think somebody would have heard something. Nobody heard a thing that night. So, now, as these stories start to spread after he talks in town, right, people start coming to the ranch to try to see what's happening. They want to view this phenomenon. So it's kind of a nightmare for the family. But this one guy drives up and says, I really need to meditate, of all things, on your property. And the rancher and his son, who've met him at the gate in their truck, kind of go, yeah, whatever, and it's not going to happen. And he says, please, I have traveled thousands of miles to get here. I've been drawn to this place. I just want to meditate. Please, please, please. They say, okay, get him in. They start driving him around the property. And when the place where he says stop is at the pasture, where a lot of this activity has happened, right? So he gets out, decides to meditate. The rancher and the son kind of lean up against the truck, go, this should be interesting. Starts chanting or whatever the hell the guy did to get his meditative state. And on the ridge in the shrub line, something comes out as he's doing this, as he's got his eyes closed and, or whatever the hell he's doing. And starts walking, to the astonishment of both the father and son, starts walking towards the guy meditating. Now, they don't say anything to this guy, which to me is just unbelievable. The thing that's walking towards them, though, is just a distortion, kind of like a Predator in the Predator movies, where things are just distorted a little bit, right? So this distortion walks up to the guy and roars at the top of its lung. That literally got the birds flying, right? The guy opens his eyes, jumps up in terror, and it disappears. So the guy actually clings to the family, to the rancher, and he's like, get off of me. The guy won't, and he threatens to actually hurt the guy if he doesn't let him go. He drives him to the fence line again, where the guy's car's waiting, and the guy turns around and says, this place is satanic, and you're obviously devil worshippers, and he tries to curse the ranch. It turns into this big, weird thing as far as I'm concerned. The family, again, was a wreck. They had missing time, mysterious scars, and on and on and on. So what happened is, Mr. Bigelow offered to buy the ranch off of the Gormans, and they were ecstatic. They said, "Oh, please, we just want to get out of here." But they had a request. They wanted the rancher. They wanted him to stay on and help them with their investigation, which unbelievably he agreed to do. He moved the family 20 miles down the road with the money they got from selling the ranch. The NIDS team came with all kinds of high-tech gear, night vision, infrared, motion sensors, kind of the whole shebang there. They were trying to come up with some kind of explanation for what happened here. They did a geomagnetic survey of the area, hoping that there would be an explanation. Maybe there was an electromagnetic field that was making people's area nuts. Maybe it was affecting the gravity somehow in the area. That was a no-go. They thought maybe hallucinogenics were growing on the property. Who knows? Maybe there was some kind of fungus like shrooms that were causing people to hallucinate. That was a no-go. They did all this stuff to eliminate and try to figure out what was happening here, like any good investigation team would do. So one of the other things the NIDS did is bring in a physicist from the intelligence community. Can't say what particular branch he was from, but when he got there to try to help them out, at night this black orb appeared over this physicist. And something started talking through the physicist, telling him to stop what they were doing. When it was done, the physicist decided he was no longer a part of the project and didn't want to be associated with it. He was absolutely horrified. So what is going on there? Could it be UFOs? Like extraterrestrial life kind of thing, or even ultra-terrestrial? Could be. Doesn't explain everything, though. Could it be some kind of haunting? I don't believe so. Because of the wide range of things that are going on there. It could be that it literally is a skinwalker, if you believe in that kind of thing. Who knows? Personally, I believe that it's more a dimensional thing. There was one other thing that happened that I didn't mention, where somebody was looking at this disturbance. Kind of the bushes were disturbed a bit. Orange orb appeared that seemed to tunnel out. And it looked like somebody was walking from the back end of a tunnel through this orange orb. And it got there, something materialized out of there that was black, kind of featureless, but at least 8 feet tall, and then it disappeared. It does seem to be my bet is it's some sort of dimensional rift that happens to be in this area. Why? What caused it? I don't know. But between the strange animals that either are from our past or have never existed here, the strange things that appeared looking at them out the window and then in front of them, the UFO activity, which would definitely be drawn to something like this, the comings and goings of things, that's about the best explanation that I have. Let me know what you think. Leave it down in the comments. As always, please like and subscribe. Hit that little bell to get notifications. Visit my Patreon page if you could. If you can become a patriot. If you want to help this show along, you want to donate at the Patreon page, please do so, or become a monthly subscriber to the Patreon page. You can subscribe again, whatever you want. That would really be helpful to us here at Off the Beaten Path. Again, thank you for 1 year on the air. How exciting. Can't believe we're still here. And as always, my brothers and sisters, you keep those heads up.